One of the things that I hear a lot during the feedback sessions is music wherein the vocals aren't understandable, and that's because of the way that they are mixed. Today I want to give you my philosophy on vocals, what they should do and how they should act in the mix. Let's dive right in. So here I have a track that I'm working on. I'm just going to play it from a little bit before this vocal comes in, and I'm going to let you listen to the clarity of this vocal. So I would say overall that sounds pretty nice. The only thing is that there's a few points in which the vocal isn't clearly understandable. And that's a problem. When talking about vocals, there's many different kinds of vocals that are being used in Psytrance. What I want to focus on are the spoken word vocals and any other vocals that really have as objective to be part of the storytelling of the track. Now in Psytrance, most of the vocals are actually spoken. We don't really do a lot of singing, but singing is also going to be included in this one because obviously if you sing something, it's part of the storytelling of the track. So this vocal right here is part of that in the sense that it sets up the story for the rest of the track. This being the intro, this is where we're first introduced to this idea of the virtual reality that this vocal and many other vocals in the track will be talking about. Now as a producer, it's really easy to try to understand what the vocal is saying. What I can do is I can go in here my project, click on solo and just listen to the vocal.
Is the entire universe a simulation? Is your world a virtual environment coded by ones and zeros? Is it a conscious computer game created by supreme beings from another timeline? What if every person on Earth was no different from a character in a movie? Reading from a script you've never seen.
Now I would say that that vocal is sounding clear to me, but the reason why it's sounding clear is that nothing else is playing. By having it soloed and by listening to the vocal, we already are able to determine what the vocal is saying, and this will stick in the back of your head when you're mixing. If I go back in now, you'll be able to hear it much clearer what the vocal is saying than you were the first time around, because you've heard it on its own. The difference between a producer though and a normal listener to your track is that they don't have that luxury of being able to hear the sound on its own soloed without anything else going on. They have to listen to the entire mix. And from that entire mix, they have to make judgments on what the vocal is actually trying to tell them through the storytelling that they're doing. In this case, I'm not quite happy with this last segment of the vocal. This last bit here is fairly unintelligible. Even when soloed, there is some weird effects going on there. But I've tried my best to kind of remedy that as much as possible. And maybe I'll go back into the production project again to make a few fixes here and there. But really for these kind of projects, I've been working on this project for so long that I just want to finish it. And the other thing is that part of this vocal specifically doesn't really add anything to the story. It's really more there for the transition. The main bulk of the story is being told in these first parts here up until here. Even arguably the part about the video game is just kind of like a clarification on what the story is actually telling. So in reality, I mostly care about the clarity of the vocals in this part here. And for other vocals, obviously, that are other parts. So the way that I go about this is that now I'm going to look into the rest of my mix and say, okay, this element is playing. What is this element doing? Okay, this is mainly providing the sub bass and the lower frequencies. So I EQ'd out all of the stuff that I don't need from this sound. You can see all of those higher frequencies aren't really necessary for the sound to perform what it needs to do. It has a certain function, mainly to provide the low end for this part of the track. So I'm constricting this element to make extra space in the higher frequencies for my vocal to sit. And this way I can just go through all of my elements. I can look into this combination of atmospheres here and do the same thing. And you can see with the same kind of idea, I have carved out a space for the vocal to sit. This EQ cut was specifically made so that the vocal can sit in here, so that it can occupy that frequency area. Now, the reason why I chose that area is because I wanted to show you that the intelligibility of a vocal really lies in its higher frequencies. You can basically high pass a vocal and remove something like 1K or even a little bit higher and still be able to hear what the vocal is saying. You can see here we have the filter at 2.5K and we're still able to hear what the vocal is saying. And the reason for that is the intelligibility of a vocal comes from these higher frequencies here. Another way that you can test it is by whispering into a microphone and looking at the graph and telling you which kind of frequencies are in there. I'll promise you there's not a lot of low frequencies that are going to be a part of that signal. So keeping in mind the fact that you can hear the vocal soloed but the listener cannot, you have to take into account that thing and try to create as much space as you need for the vocal to stick out. Generally speaking, what I do is I hunt for a mix where the vocal is laying on top of the rest of the track, so that the rest of the track is supporting the vocal and the vocal is really sticking through the mix. Now, obviously you can exaggerate this effect, but it's really hard to mess this up because of this effect that I talked about before, where you know what the vocal is supposed to sound like because you've heard it on its own. And therefore it's very easy to understand what the vocal is saying for you and therefore to judge it wrongly in the mix. Therefore, another way that I've been thinking about it is a little bit more in the production side of things, just not putting a lot of elements on top of the vocal if I know that I'm going to need that space for that vocal. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that you can do within the production to make sure that there's enough space available for your vocal to sit in. And just starting off with the right sounds and the right amount of space before you go into the mixing process is going to make things a lot easier. So I've quickly opened up a different project. As you can see here, this is a different project than we had before. And I mainly want to focus on this vocal here. And the reason why I want to do that is I want to show you how much space I leave with the rest of the elements. We can see it already in the effects, but if we scroll up to the leads, there's like one atmosphere here, a couple of lead sounds, a couple of one-shot sounds, but all of the main sequences and stuff like that aren't happening around the vocal itself. And even in terms of drums, I'm going very light on the drums so that I have more space for the vocal to actually sit in, to occupy those higher frequencies, to make it understandable.
This is our show where we explore every aspect of what it means to be human.
The problem was not the physical. The problem was a spiritual racism, not the spiritual problem.
So you can hear with this lead that I have here, this is a good example of something that would really cover up a vocal. This is this kind of gritty lead that we have. Something like that can really mess up the space that the vocal needs to sit in, because it's obviously also a bright, strong element. So for that reason, I don't introduce this element in any way when the vocal is playing, and just have it come in after the vocal. So to finalize this song, there's really three ways that you can think about separating your vocals from the rest of the track. One is in terms of time, like we just saw, where you place elements at a different spot in the track to make sure that they don't coincide with the vocal. The other one is through volume. You can just make the vocal so much louder that it's actually standing out in the mix. And finally, there's EQ work that you can do. Obviously, you can carve out certain frequencies and other elements to make space for your vocals, or you can bring out those frequencies in the vocals a little bit more using that same type of EQing, but the other way around, where you boost instead of cut. Usually what I would recommend is that you go through a mix of all three of them. There isn't often a case where you want to completely remove all other elements from the track when the vocal is playing. Obviously the kick and bass was in that last part, but I also had some atmosphere, some other sounds, some effects on those vocals that were really competing with the vocals at the same time. But you can think of that as all background material that's all supposed to be lower in volume. And we can see that that's actually true. We have our main vocal here, and then we have those vocal effects that I talked about. You can see that these are significantly lowered in volume than this one. And keep in mind that they're all starting out from the same basic volume that they have. I import all of my tracks normalized, so the volume difference that you see between those channels is actually there. So that's going to be it for today. That's how I separate my vocals and make sure that they stand out. If you have learned anything new and you want to support the channel, make sure that you like. And if you're new here and you want to see more of what I do, make sure that you're subscribed. Another good way of supporting the channel is through watching another video of mine. So I'm going to leave 2 of them in the end cards, and that's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.